The first time my son told me I had already had my turn in my own house, he was standing beneath a framed photograph of his mother, the woman who had spent 37 years making that house feel like home. His wife had already packed away half of Helen's things because they were too dated. They had been living with me rent-free for 22 months because they said they were saving for a place of their own. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I found an Instagram post showing my dining room decorated with the caption, "Hosting both sides of the family in OUR Franklin home this year." I had not agreed to host anyone except the three of us. I had definitely not agreed to what came next. Halfway through Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law announced that her parents were moving into my 2 empty bedrooms after Christmas. When I said no, my son leaned across the table and told me, "Dad, you had almost 40 years here with Mom. You have already had your turn." I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and brought back the blue metal recipe box his mother had used every Thanksgiving since 1988. Then I looked at the 2 people who had slowly turned me into a guest inside the house I paid off 13 years earlier and said, "If this is already your home, then you should have no trouble leaving mine by New Year's." My name is Elliot Harper. I was 69 when this happened, retired after 34 years supervising maintenance crews for a regional grocery chain around Nashville, Tennessee. I live in Franklin in a brick ranch house with a deep front porch, 4 bedrooms, an old pecan tree in the backyard, and a sunroom my wife Helen used to call her little greenhouse, even though she grew more herbs than flowers. We bought the house when our son Caleb was 3. The neighborhood was unfinished back then. Half the streets ended in dirt, and we could hear construction crews framing houses before sunrise. Helen chose the cream kitchen cabinets, the green shutters, the oak floors, and the ridiculous brass light fixture over the dining table that I complained about for 20 years and refused to replace after she died. She planted hydrangeas along the side fence and lavender beside the front steps. She kept handwritten recipes in a blue metal box with bent corners and grease stains on half the cards. The house did not become sacred because it was expensive. It became sacred because ordinary life happened there long enough to leave fingerprints. Caleb learned to ride a bicycle in the driveway. Helen and I fought about money in the kitchen and made up on the porch. Christmas mornings happened in the living room. Flu, homework, bad report cards, graduations, neighborhood barbecues. My mother's last Thanksgiving, Helen's 50th birthday. 37 years of ordinary evidence that a family had existed there. Then Helen died. Pancreatic cancer took 11 months to do what I still cannot describe, without feeling angry at biology itself. She was 66. The last summer, she spent most mornings in the sunroom because she said the light made her feel less sick. Caleb visited whenever he could. He was 36 then and living in Nashville with his wife, Marissa. He sat beside his mother's recliner one Sunday afternoon and promised her he would look after me. Helen laughed because she knew me better than anyone. "Your father does not need looking after," she told him. "He needs people who remember to invite him places." That was Helen. She could summarize a marriage in one sentence. She died in our bedroom on an October morning, with me holding her left hand and Caleb holding her right. For the first year afterward, the house was unbearable. Every room carried a memory but no sound. I ate cereal over the sink because cooking for one felt ridiculous. I left the television on in the living room when I went to bed because silence had weight. I would catch myself beginning a sentence in the kitchen and then remember there was nobody there to answer. Caleb called twice a week at first. Marissa called occasionally too. She and I had never been especially close, but we had been polite. She worked remotely doing social media marketing for a boutique fitness company. Caleb sold commercial flooring and was good enough at it to earn a decent living, though commissions made his income unpredictable. They rented a newer 2-bedroom apartment in Nashville and talked constantly about buying a house in Franklin before prices climbed further. About 16 months after Helen died, Caleb called one Tuesday evening. "Dad, can Marissa and I come down tomorrow? We need to talk." I assumed they were pregnant. I cleaned the kitchen before they arrived because grief does not erase old habits. They sat at my dining table under Helen's brass light fixture. Caleb looked embarrassed. Marissa looked prepared. Their rent had increased again. Between student loans, car payments, and everything else, they said saving for a down payment was impossible. "We were wondering if maybe we could stay here for a year," Caleb said. 12 months. 18 at the absolute most. Marissa leaned forward. "We would help with groceries, utilities, everything. We are not looking for a free ride, Elliot. We just need a reset." I looked around the table at 3 empty chairs. The answer felt obvious. Of course. Caleb's shoulders dropped with relief. Marissa cried and hugged me. You are saving us. I remember how good those words felt. Being needed after Helen died felt close enough to belonging that I did not examine the difference. They moved in the following February. 2 moving trucks, 12 plastic storage bins, a sectional sofa they had no room for, 3 bicycles, enough kitchen appliances to stock a small restaurant. I helped Caleb carry boxes into the guest rooms and felt the house waking up around me. Footsteps overhead, cabinet doors, music from the bathroom, someone laughing at a television show I did not watch. For the first month, it was almost wonderful. Marissa cooked dinner twice a week. Caleb helped replace a broken section of fence. We drank coffee together Saturday mornings. I told myself Helen would be relieved I was not alone. Then small things began changing. The ceramic pitcher Helen kept on the kitchen counter disappeared. I found it wrapped in newspaper inside a hall closet. Marissa said it fought with the cleaner look she was creating. The embroidered cushions Helen's sister had made were replaced with beige pillows from Target. A family photograph from Caleb's high school graduation vanished from the hallway because Marissa said the frames looked inconsistent. She moved Helen's cookbooks from the kitchen shelf to a storage bin in the garage because nobody uses physical cookbooks anymore. None of those changes was worth a fight by itself. That was how it happened. Every individual act was small enough to make resistance look unreasonable. I began using the sentence, "It is not a big deal," the way some men use pain medication. By summer, my kitchen no longer worked the way I knew it. My cast iron skillet was stored on a bottom shelf because Marissa said it looked greasy. Her blender, espresso machine, air fryer, juicer, stand mixer, and milk frother covered the counters. The drawer where Helen kept dish towels became a supplement drawer filled with protein powders. One morning I reached for the chip brown mug Helen gave me on our 20th anniversary and found it missing. Marissa had put it in a donation box by the garage door. "It is cracked," she said. "Nobody should drink from that." "I do. You have 20 other mugs." "Helen bought me that one." She sighed. "I know. Everything in this house has a Helen story." The sentence was not shouted. Somehow that made it worse. Caleb was standing by the refrigerator. I looked at him. He said, "Dad, she is just trying to make the place functional for 3 adults. It was functional before." "You know what I mean." I did. Functional meant useful to the people currently making decisions. Memory did not qualify. I took the mug upstairs and kept it on my nightstand after that. My bedroom gradually became the last room that still looked like my life. The living room recliner went next. Helen had bought it for me after knee surgery. It was brown leather, ugly, and more comfortable than any piece of furniture I'd ever owned. Marissa mentioned several times that it made the living room feel like a retirement center. One afternoon I came home from the hardware store and found it in the garage. The new sectional had been rearranged across the space where it sat. "Where am I supposed to sit?" I asked. Marissa pointed toward the sectional. "Anywhere." "Marissa, why did you move my chair?" "Because the room looks better." Caleb came downstairs during the argument. I said, "Son, I would like my chair back." He rubbed both hands over his face. "Dad, seriously? Can we not have a crisis over a chair?" Crisis. That word began appearing whenever I objected. My preference became a crisis. My memory became clutter. My house became the space. Helen became the past. I dragged the recliner into the sunroom myself. It barely fit between her old plant stands, but at least nobody moved it again. I started spending more evenings there, looking over the backyard while Marissa and Caleb watched television in the living room. Sometimes I wondered how a person becomes lonely inside a house full of people. The answer is slowly. Caleb and Marissa's original one-year plan passed, with no mention of leaving. I asked casually one Saturday whether they had started touring houses. Caleb said prices were still insane. Marissa said interest rates made buying financially irresponsible. That same month, a new Peloton arrived. 2 weeks later, they spent a long weekend at a resort in Asheville. In July, Marissa bought a designer handbag after telling me she found an unbelievable deal. I started noticing restaurant reservations, concert tickets, weekend trips. I did not resent them enjoying life. I resented realizing that the money they were supposedly saving because I provided free housing had become lifestyle money instead. Still, I said nothing. I told myself they were adults, and what they did with their income was their business. That would have been true if their choices had not depended on mine. The first social media post that bothered me appeared in August. Marissa had photographed the renovated living room, our kitchen, and the backyard during sunset. The caption said, "Slowly turning our Franklin house into the warm, modern home we always dreamed of." Our Franklin house. I stared at the words. In one photograph, Helen's brass dining light had been cropped out. In another, my recliner was barely visible through the sunroom doorway, looking exactly like something hidden. I commented nothing. 2 weeks later, a package arrived addressed to Caleb and Marissa Harper, homeowners. I handed it to Caleb. "Interesting title." He laughed. "Marketing junk. Apparently your wife's posts confused somebody." His face tightened. "Dad, she is just making content. Using my house. Our house while we live here." "No, the house where you live." His expression changed. "Why are you being territorial?" That question stayed with me. Territorial. As if ownership itself had become rude because it interrupted the future they were already imagining. My neighbor, Ruth Daniels, noticed before I admitted anything. Ruth had lived next door almost as long as Helen and me. One evening, she found me trimming hydrangeas in near darkness. "They have you sleeping in the garage yet?" she asked. I laughed. "Not yet." She stopped smiling. "Elliot, Helen would haunt you if she saw how much of yourself you are giving away because you are afraid the house will get quiet again." I told her Caleb was my son. Ruth said, "Then he should know the difference between coming home and taking over." I defended him anyway. That is what parents do when the truth first arrives through someone else's mouth. In October, Marissa asked whether she could use Helen's sunroom as a permanent office because her current workspace upstairs had poor light during video calls. I said no immediately. It surprised both of us. "I use that room." "You sit there at night." "Exactly. There are 4 bedrooms." "Then use one of those." She stared at me as if I had become unreasonable without warning. That evening, Caleb came into my bedroom. "Marissa is upset. She will recover." "Dad." "What? You keep acting like we are temporary." I looked at him. "You told me 12 to 18 months. Plans change." "Then tell me the new plan." He looked away. "We are trying to build something." "Where?" "Here, for now." "For now" is not a plan. He became defensive. "Why are you suddenly rushing us? You have been here almost 2 years." "You are alone, Dad. We thought you liked having us here." "I liked having my son here." "That does not mean I stopped owning a home." He left without answering. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I went to the recycling bin looking for a shipping box. A glossy brochure sat on top. 12-day Mediterranean cruise, balcony cabin, Rome to Barcelona, booked for the following May. I found a printed confirmation beneath it. More than $9,000. Paid deposit. That afternoon, another clue arrived. Marissa posted a video decorating my dining room for Thanksgiving. White candles, linen napkins, eucalyptus branches, every trace of Helen's old decorations gone. The caption read, "Hosting both families in our Franklin home this year. So grateful we finally have space for everyone. Both families." I called Caleb. "Who is coming Thursday?" He hesitated. "Marissa's parents." "I thought they were having Thanksgiving with her brother." "Plans changed." "Who else?" "Her sister, the kids, maybe her aunt." "That is 12 people. The house holds 12. Did you think about asking me?" "Dad, it is Thanksgiving. In my house." Silence. Then he said, "Why do you keep saying that like we are strangers?" I answered, "Because strangers usually ask before inviting 10 people." He hung up frustrated. Thanksgiving morning, I woke at 5. I had cooked the turkey every year Helen was alive. For a few minutes, I considered letting Marissa handle everything. Then I saw Helen's blue recipe box in the pantry behind protein bars where somebody had shoved it. I opened it and found her card for cornbread dressing written in blue ink. At the bottom, she had written one year, "Elliot adds too much sage. Ignore him." I laughed alone in the kitchen, then cried for 30 seconds, then started chopping celery. Marissa came downstairs at 7 and seemed annoyed I had begun cooking. I told my mom we were doing a more modern menu. "The turkey is modern enough." "Elliot, people have survived this recipe for 37 years. She looked around the counters. "Can you at least not put out all Helen's old serving pieces?" My mother brought matching dishes. "These are Thanksgiving dishes. They are chipped. So am I." She did not laugh. By noon, the house was crowded with Marissa's family. Her parents, Dennis and Paula, arrived carrying wine and overnight bags. I noticed the bags but assumed they planned to stay one night. Marissa's sister arrived with her husband and two children. Her aunt brought flowers and said, "This house is even prettier than the pictures." Paula walked through the living room, touching furniture and commenting on how much potential the upstairs had. Dennis asked whether the basement could be finished. I felt something tightening in my stomach. Caleb's only contribution was a quick hug and, "You good, Dad?" before returning to the kitchen to help Marissa. At 2, everyone sat down. I was placed at the head of the table because apparently symbolism mattered when it photographed well. Marissa took several pictures before anyone ate. She asked me to move Helen's gravy boat because it did not match the place settings. I said no. We ate with the gravy boat exactly where it had sat for decades. Conversation was polite until Paula mentioned their landlord. The rent on their condo near Knoxville was increasing again. Dennis said they were tired of wasting money. Marissa looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at his plate. Then Marissa smiled at me. "Actually, Elliot, this is probably a good time to talk about something." Every muscle in my body tightened. "What?" "Mom and Dad are going to stay here for a while after Christmas." The table went quiet enough for the refrigerator motor to become noticeable. "Stay here where?" I asked. Paula said brightly, "The 2 upstairs rooms. We do not need much." I looked at Caleb. "You knew about this. We were going to talk to you." "When?" "Now. This is not talking. This is announcing." Marissa immediately became defensive. "Why are you making it hostile?" "Because you told your parents they are moving into my house without asking me. There are empty rooms. They are not available." Paula's face went pink. Dennis looked embarrassed. Marissa said, "You barely go upstairs." "I barely use the roof too. That does not make it public housing." Caleb whispered, "Dad, come on." "No. They just need 6 months." I laughed once. "That sounds familiar." Marissa slammed her napkin down. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You needed 12 months. You have been here 22. We help you." "How?" "We keep you from being alone." The cruelty of the sentence was probably accidental. That did not make it less precise. "So my rent payment is companionship?" "That is not what I said." "It is exactly what you said." Caleb leaned forward. "Dad, nobody is using you." I found the cruise confirmation. His face changed. Marissa said, "You went through our things?" "It was in my recycling bin." "We are allowed to travel." "Of course you are. But do not tell me you cannot afford your own home while spending $9,000 on a Mediterranean cruise." "It is our money," she snapped. "Correct. And this is my house." The room went completely still. Marissa's nephew stopped eating. Paula whispered, "Maybe we should go." Marissa shook her head. "No, Mom, we are not doing this. We have spent 2 years tiptoeing around a dead woman's house because Elliot refuses to move forward." I felt every person at the table disappear except her. "What did you say?" "Helen is gone," Caleb whispered. "Marissa." She continued because anger had given her permission to say what patience had hidden. "The angels, the recipes, the chair, the mug. Every room has rules because Helen touched something in 1996. This is not a museum." "No," I said. "It is my home. And what happens when you are gone?" The question hung there. Dennis said, "Marissa, enough." She ignored him. "Caleb is your only child. Eventually, this becomes his anyway. We are trying to build a future instead of pretending time stopped when Helen died." I looked at my son. "Do you agree?" He stared down at his plate. That hurt before he even spoke. "I think she is saying it badly." "Do you agree?" Caleb inhaled. "Dad, you had almost 40 years here with Mom." Marissa closed her eyes briefly as if even she knew what was coming. Caleb continued, "You had your life. You had your turn in this house. We are trying to build ours." I stared at the man whose first steps happened on the oak floor beneath his chair. "My turn? That is not how I meant it." "Then explain it. You are 69. You have retirement income. You could downsize someday, travel, get a condo. Why keep 4 bedrooms empty because of memories?" "They are not empty to me. That is the problem." There it was. My grief had become the obstacle between them and the asset they expected to inherit. I stood slowly. Nobody stopped me. I walked into the kitchen, opened the pantry, and took Helen's blue recipe box from behind Marissa's protein powder. Then I went to my bedroom and retrieved the chipped mug from my nightstand. In the garage, I found one ceramic angel still wrapped in newspaper from the box Marissa had packed 2 years earlier. I carried all three objects back to the table and placed them beside the turkey. Do you know what these are? I asked Caleb. He looked miserable. Yes. Your mother's dressing recipe. The mug she bought me when you were 8. One of the angels you broke when you were 6, and she glued back together after you cried. Caleb looked at the angel. The crack still ran through one wing. I remember. Good, because for 22 months I have let you and Marissa treat everything that reminds me of my life as clutter, while behaving as if your future ownership has already begun. Dad? No. You spoke. Now I will. Nobody moved. I opened this house because I was lonely. That is my part in this. I wanted footsteps so badly I stopped asking whose footsteps they were becoming. I let my chair go to the garage. I let the kitchen change. I started drinking coffee in my bedroom because my mug embarrassed somebody. I let your wife post this house as hers. I let 2 adults with full-time incomes live here without rent because I believed I was helping them build a future. I looked at the cruise brochure I had brought from the counter earlier. You did build one. You just built it on top of me. Marissa laughed bitterly. So what now? You want rent? No. What do you want? I want my house back. Caleb's face went white. What does that mean? It means Marissa's parents are not moving in. It means you and Marissa will find your own place by January 1st. Paula gasped softly. Marissa stared at me. You are throwing us out on Thanksgiving? No, I am telling you on Thanksgiving because you chose Thanksgiving to announce your parents were moving into my bedrooms. Where are we supposed to go? You make good money. You have enough for a Mediterranean cruise. I believe in your resourcefulness. That cruise is non-refundable. Then enjoy it from your new address. Caleb stood. Dad, do not do this. Do what? Blow up the family because you are upset. I am not upset. That was true by then. I was clearer than I had been in 2 years. If this is already your house, you should have no trouble leaving mine by New Year's. Marissa started crying. You are cruel. No. Cruel would be letting you believe another 22 months of this are possible. Dennis pushed his chair back. We are leaving. He looked at me. Elliot, I did not know you had never agreed to any of this. Marissa said, Dad, do not apologize to him. Dennis looked at his daughter. You invited us to move into a man's house without asking him. Paula stood too. I thought Caleb owned part of this place. My eyes moved to my son. His face answered before he did. Why would they think that? I asked. Caleb rubbed his forehead. I may have said eventually, you told them you owned part of my house? No, I said it was basically a family property. It is not basically anything. The table went silent again. My home had become an inheritance in conversations I was not invited to. Dennis gathered coats. Paula apologized again. Marissa called them cowards for leaving. Her sister quietly took her children and followed. Within 15 minutes, the loud Thanksgiving she had staged online was reduced to 4 adults standing around cold food. Caleb stared at me. Can we talk privately? We are already family. Marissa folded her arms. Fine. Let us be honest. He does not want us here because he cannot stand anyone changing Helen's precious house. I looked at her. You are partly right. I cannot stand being erased from my own life. Nobody erased you. You removed my wife's things, hid my mug, moved my chair, told people this was your home, invited 12 people without asking, planned to move your parents upstairs, and discuss what happens to my house when I die. What would you call that? She had no immediate answer. Moving forward, Caleb said quietly. The words almost hurt more than, your turn. Then move forward somewhere else. He began crying. My 38-year-old son stood in the kitchen where Helen used to cut his birthday cakes and cried like he had when he was 12. Dad, I do not want to lose you. Then stop treating me like I am already dead. That sentence ended the fight. They went upstairs. I packed leftovers alone. At 9, Ruth knocked on the back door, carrying a plate of pie because she had seen cars leaving early and knew something had happened. I told her most of it. She listened without interrupting. Then she looked at the blue recipe box on the counter and said, Helen would have been proud of you. For throwing our son out? For finally understanding that loneliness is not the worst thing that can happen inside a house. The next morning, Marissa posted online. Nothing directly accusatory. She was better at language than that. A black and white photograph of moving boxes appeared with the caption, Sometimes the people you sacrifice for remind you that blood does not guarantee a home. Friends flooded the comments with hearts. Someone wrote, After everything you did for him, Another said, "Protect your peace." I did not reply. Caleb did not post anything. Over the next week, relatives began calling. Marissa had told people I suddenly threw them out because she wanted to redecorate. My cousin Ellen said, "Elliot, you have 4 bedrooms. Would it really hurt to let them stay?" I asked one question. "Did she tell you she announced at Thanksgiving that her parents were moving into 2 rooms without asking me?" Silence. "No. Did she tell you they have lived here rent-free almost 2 years while spending thousands on trips?" "No. Did she tell you Caleb said I already had my turn in my own house?" Another silence. Ellen said, "That sounds different." "It is the same story. You just heard the missing half." I stopped explaining after that. People who called to judge me received one sentence: "You are welcome to offer them your spare rooms." Nobody did. Caleb and Marissa found a townhouse rental in Spring Hill by mid-December. It was smaller than they wanted and cost more than their old apartment. They canceled some furniture orders and delayed the cruise. Losing part of the deposit, I did not celebrate. Consequences are not always victories. Sometimes they are simply reality being allowed into a room where generosity kept blocking the door. Moving day was December 29th. Caleb carried boxes quietly. Marissa barely spoke to me. The last thing she removed was her espresso machine. The empty counter beneath it looked enormous. Caleb stood in the kitchen after the truck was loaded and touched the chipped mug beside the sink. "I am sorry about Mom's things." "Which part?" "All of it. You let it happen." He nodded. "I know." "Why?" He took a long time. "Because every time Marissa changed something, I thought defending it would sound like choosing you over her. And staying silent sounded like what?" He looked at me. "Choosing her over you." "Yes." He cried again, but this time neither of us rushed to end the discomfort. "I thought you needed us," he said. "I did." "Then why did you never say anything?" "Because needing someone makes you very good at pretending their behavior does not hurt." He nodded. "I am sorry. I believe you are sorry today. I do not know yet what it changes." That was not the answer he wanted, but it was honest. He hugged me before leaving. I hugged him back. Marissa waited by the car. She did not say goodbye. After they left, the quiet returned. For the first 2 nights it frightened me. I heard the refrigerator, the heater, the settling wood. My first instinct was to turn on every television. Instead, I sat in my recliner, now returned to the living room, and let the house be quiet. Quiet did not insult me. Quiet did not move my belongings. Quiet did not calculate square footage around my future death. By New Year's Day, Helen's ceramic angels were back on the mantel. The old family photographs returned to the hallway. Her cookbooks filled the kitchen shelf. I moved half of them because, if I was being fair, we did own too many cookbooks. That small choice mattered. Reclaiming my home did not mean freezing it in 2019. I repainted the guest room myself, replaced an old carpet, and turned one bedroom into a woodworking room. Helen's sunroom stayed exactly where it had always been, except I added a new reading lamp and bought a healthier rosemary plant because hers had finally died. I was not building a shrine. I was building a home where memory and present life were both allowed to exist. Caleb called 2 weeks later. No request. "How are you?" That was the entire reason for the call. We spoke for 20 minutes. A month later, he asked whether he could come over alone. Marissa was angry about that. He came anyway. We ate sandwiches in the kitchen. He told me their finances were tighter than expected. I did not offer money. He did not ask. That restraint created more trust than any apology speech could have. Then he told me something I had not known. "Marissa thought when Mom died, you would eventually sell the house and give me part of the money." "Why?" "Because I told her you probably would." "Did I ever say that?" "No." "Then why tell her?" He stared at the table. I think I had already started thinking of the house as something waiting for me. There it was, not Marissa's greed alone. My son's entitlement had given it a place to grow. "You are my only child," I said. "You may inherit things someday, but waiting for someone to die is not ownership." "I know that now." "Good. Are you changing your will?" I almost laughed. That is a bold follow-up question. His face went red. "I did not mean—" "Yes, you did. And that is okay. At least we are being honest." I told him my estate plan was my business while I was alive. He nodded. "Fair." That was the first mature conversation we had had in years. Marissa remained distant. She sent one message after 3 months. "I am sorry things got so toxic. I was trying to build a family." I answered, A family cannot be built by treating one living member like an obstacle. She did not reply. 6 months later, she asked to meet. We sat at a coffee shop rather than my house. She surprised me by arriving without Caleb. I hated that house when I first moved in, she admitted. Not the building. What it represented. Helen was everywhere, and everyone talked about how wonderful she was. I felt like I was living in another woman's life. She was my wife, I know, and Caleb's mother. I know that too. She looked embarrassed. Instead of making my own place eventually, I tried to make hers disappear. That was the first real apology. Why did my mug need to disappear, I asked. She almost smiled sadly. Because it reminded me I did not have the right to decide everything. That is very honest. I am trying. She admitted the social post made her feel like she had achieved the home she could not yet afford. Every compliment rewarded the illusion. When her parents' rent increased, inviting them into our house felt natural because she had repeated the phrase until she believed it. And Caleb never corrected me. No, I am angry at him for that too. Be careful, I said. Do not turn his silence into permission for your behavior. That is what he did with yours. She nodded. Fair. We did not hug. She did not ask to return. We began rebuilding something cautious after that. Caleb and Marissa eventually bought a modest 3-bedroom house in Murfreesboro. It took another 2 years of saving because free housing was no longer doing the work for them. Their first Thanksgiving there, they invited me and Ruth. I arrived carrying Helen's blue recipe box because Caleb had asked for the dressing recipe. Marissa said, "Put whatever serving dish you want on the table." I brought the old gravy boat. She laughed. Of course you did. It was the first joke between us that did not have a victim. Halfway through dinner, Caleb raised his glass. My body tensed automatically. He noticed. Relax, Dad. No announcements about roommates. Everyone laughed. Then he said, I spent a long time thinking home was something I would inherit. Dad taught me the hard way that home is something you are responsible for, while the people inside it are still alive. I looked down at my plate. He continued, I am sorry I made you feel like you were standing in the way of my future, when you were the reason I had so much of a past. I cried. Nobody rushed to stop me. When I drove back to Franklin that night, the house was dark. I turned on the porch light, carried the empty casserole dish inside, and made coffee in my chipped mug. Helen's angels remained on the mantel. My recliner remained in the living room. The sunroom smelled faintly of rosemary. There were empty bedrooms upstairs, and they no longer accused me of wasting anything. Empty space is not wasted just because someone else wants it. Peace takes up room too. That was a lesson it took me nearly 70 years to learn. I had spent my whole life believing a good father was the man who said yes first and figured out the cost later. I believed giving without keeping score made the giving pure. Maybe sometimes it does. But generosity without boundaries can teach people terrible lessons. It can teach an adult son that his father's property is simply the early version of his inheritance. It can teach a daughter-in-law that another woman's memories are clutter if they interfere with the aesthetic she prefers. It can teach an old man that being needed is safer than being alone, even when being needed slowly removes him from his own life. Caleb and Marissa did not become villains the day they moved in. I did not become wise the day I asked them to leave. We all participated in the arrangement because it benefited something we were afraid to lose. They were afraid they would never afford the lifestyle they wanted. I was afraid silence would swallow the house after Helen. Their fear turned into entitlement. Mine turned into surrender. Thanksgiving only made both visible. Today, Caleb and I are closer than we were before they lived with me, but we are closer because the relationship has limits now. He calls before coming over. Marissa asks before changing anything when she visits, sometimes exaggeratedly. Elliot, may I move this napkin 3 inches? I tell her she remains on probation regarding textiles. We laugh. I have never given them a key again. That boundary surprises people. But he is your son, relatives say. Exactly. He is my son, which is why our relationship should be strong enough to survive a locked door. Love that requires unrestricted access to your house, money, time, or guilt is not closeness. It is dependence wearing family clothing. I also stopped apologizing for keeping Helen's things. Some will eventually be donated. Some will go to Caleb. Some may end up in a dumpster after I am gone. Objects are objects. Their power comes from choice. The problem was never that Marissa wanted a modern living room. The problem was that everyone else kept making choices about my life before checking whether I was still living it. My son told me I had already had my turn. He was wrong. As long as you are breathing, it is still your turn to decide where you sit, which memories stay on the shelf, who gets a key, and what kind of behavior gets called family inside your own home. So tell me honestly, if your adult son and daughter-in-law lived rent-free in your house for nearly 2 years, slowly erased your late spouse's things, started calling the property theirs, and then announced at Thanksgiving that her parents were moving in because you had already had your turn, would you ever let them live with you again after genuine apologies? Or would giving them a second key be one boundary you would never cross?